Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Savvy Psychologist. I'm your host, Dr. Ellen Hendrickson, and every week I'll help you meet life's challenges with evidence-based research, a sympathetic ear, and zero judgment. So this week on the podcast, by request from an anonymous listener who wonders if her depressed partner might be bringing her down, we'll investigate whether or not depression is contagious. And the answer might surprise you. So here we go. Spoiler alert. The short answer to the question is yes. Depression is not called the common cold of mental illness for nothing. But, like most things, it's complicated. Depression is contagious, but it's not as if you get infected when your depressed friend cries on your shoulder. Instead, your own susceptibility or immunity depends on lots of things: your genetics, your history, stress, and more. Now, it's been known for almost a decade that both healthy and unhealthy behaviors are contagious. If your friends quit smoking or become obese, you're more likely to do so too. And even suicide can come in clusters. Now, depression comes with its own set of unhealthy behaviors: pessimistic talk, criticizing self and others, canceling social plans, getting into unhealthy sleeping and eating patterns, and generally being irritable or withdrawn. And it turns out that these behaviors and the negative beliefs that drive them can be communicated from person to person. So roommates of depressed college students, children of depressed parents, and yes, for the listener who requested this episode, spouses of depressed partners often show comparable depressive symptoms. But it's not just the people you live with or see every day. Depression can be contagious within up to 3 degrees of separation. So we'd better hope that Kevin Bacon's not depressed, or all of Hollywood is going down. So let's look more closely at a study of college roommates that came out in 2014. So researchers studied over 100 pairs of newly assigned freshman roommates at move-in, and then again 3 and 6 months later. And they examined, among other things, the students' symptoms of depression and their tendency to ruminate. That is, their inclination to get tangled up in their own lousy feelings and to obsess about the causes and consequences of feeling bad. Now, sure enough, freshmen who were paired with a roommate with a tendency to ruminate also picked up the tendency, which greatly increased their risk of depression. Now, to be clear, depression symptoms themselves weren't contagious, but the thinking styles were. And freshmen who quote-unquote caught a ruminative style of thinking had twice as many depressive symptoms after 6 months as those who didn't pick up the thinking style. Next, a 2015 study showed that depression can be made contagious under laboratory conditions, at least in rats. So researchers induced depression in rats by putting them through unpredictable, uncontrollable stressors over several weeks, which is a close approximation of chronic stress in people. Now, for the rats, this meant things like keeping the lights on for 48 hours at a stretch and spilling water on their bedding. All things probably better than being a pet in a kindergarten classroom, but still enough to make the rats depressed. And so what does this look like for a rat? Well, it doesn't mean turning down invitations to a rat's night out. It means an apathy to sugar water, a lab rat's greatest pleasure. And this apathy is a marker of anhedonia, a hallmark symptom of depression in people and, apparently, in rats. So, after the rats became depressed, the researchers introduced some new roommates. So 2 depressed rats and a new, fresh-faced, non-depressed rat, hiya guys, were housed together. And it turns out that living with someone depressed is, well, depressing, even if you're a rat. Because within just a few weeks, the new rats exhibited the same symptoms as the depressed rats. Now, we can't replicate such a controlled experiment with humans, plus I don't think I'd let researchers come to my house and spill water on my bedding, but the findings make sense. Given enough airtime, a negative outlook about the world, yourself, and the future can be convincing. If your depressed roommate or partner is critical, withdrawn, apathetic, and convinces you things will never get better, the dark cloud can spread over you too. Now, does this mean you should drop your depressed friend or partner? Well, unfortunately, only you can answer that one. It's a tough challenge without an easy solution. On the one hand, do your best to communicate that your loved one is just that, loved. Not to mention that they're important to you, worthy of your love, and deserving of feeling better. You can encourage them to seek help, but it may take an incredible amount of bravery on their part and patience on yours to help them take that first step. On the other hand, staying out of guilt when you've given your all isn't an option either. You can't rescue your loved one. You're up against a host of factors, none of which you can control, and there may come a point where you need to save yourself. Depression annihilates any shred of motivation, and in severe depression, it can be difficult to get motivated to eat, shower, or unfortunately, to seek help or make changes in one's life. Now, here's a hopeful note. It's not only depressive thinking that's contagious. Positive emotions and thinking styles can be contagious too. So think of the rush of excitement at a sports event or concert, the palpable calm after a yoga class, or the simple courtesy of service with a smile. And of course, the warm fuzzies from hugging someone you love. Indeed, in the roommate study, freshmen who were paired with a roommate whose thinking style was more positive, quote unquote, caught a healthier thinking style. So to sum up, thinking styles and emotions are contagious. And while your partner isn't the only factor, depressive thinking definitely plays a role in whether your partnership spirals into a distress system or holds strong as a support system. If today's episode was helpful to you, let me know by liking on Facebook, subscribing to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, or subscribing to the biweekly newsletter at quickanddirtytips.com/newsletters. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm Dr. Ellen Hendrickson, and next week on the podcast, it's the 100th episode. After 2 years, millions of downloads, and an iTunes award, we've reached 100 episodes, and it would not have been possible without you. So to say thanks, we'll cover a double whammy: 5 tips to improve both your health and your happiness. And in the meantime, transcripts for this and every other episode, as well as links to the studies I mentioned, are always available on quickanddirtytips.com/savvy-psychologist. Of course, the Savvy Psychologist is strictly for informational purposes and doesn't substitute for mental health care from a licensed professional. But thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week for a happier, healthier mind.